Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me for another restful episode of true, scary stories to help you fall asleep. Today, we have another compilation of true, scary stories. I hope you enjoy them. So without further ado, lay back, relax, and enjoy these true, scary stories. I got snowed in at my family cabin, 8 miles from the nearest paved road. The whole family and I were scheduled to go to Hawaii. I got trapped the day before the flight, and they left without me, which I would have done too. It snowed over 4 feet in 48 hours in New Mexico. Power went off early. No stove, no fridge, no light, no running water. I had to heat the house via the wood stove, had to melt snow on the stove for drinking water and cooking. Power came back on luckily after a day or two. I call all of my friends on the landline just to talk to someone. Day 10, I start to run out of food. I grab a very expired can of chili from the cupboard and heat it up. I heat half and immediately start to vomit and feel like crap. I call poison control, and they say that I might have botulism. Can't say for sure. I'm snowed in and can't get to a hospital. They say that if I do have botulism, the first sign will be numbness in my extremities. After that, it could move quickly to my heart muscle. So if I feel any numbness, call back and they'll scramble a chopper. Luckily, it was just food poisoning. At 15 days, they slow the feeder dirt row. At this point, I've reread all of the Harry Potter books. I'm eating rice with bullion power for near a week. I give my 11-year-old Aussie a little trank, call my dad to give in as close as possible, and Avalanche carried my dog through the powder until I reached the car. It was epic. In Buffalo in 2006, we had what has been dubbed as the October storm. I was working an overnight shift at a group home by myself. In the middle of the night, I noticed snow coming down hard, like January hard in October. It was relentless. I've never seen so much snowfall in such a short period of time. Shortly after, I noticed the sky looked like it was on fire. When I managed to open the door and get the kid out, there were tons of electrical wires down and sparking because of the weight of the snow. The entire sky was bright orange. I thought the roof was on fire. I was terrified. As soon as daylight broke, the entire city was buried under snow. Stayed that way for over a week. $530 million worth of damage. Near the end of March 2007, I was on an alpine tour in the Wapta ice fields in Alberta, Canada. The conditions were not good when we set out. Heavy snowfall, extremely high winds, temperatures around negative 20 degrees Celsius. Danger was high, probably borderline extreme at the time of our departure. We set out by skiing up to the Bow Hunt, an alpine club of Canada, self-supporting hut way up on the toe of the glacier, and proceeded to wait out the storm, which took another full day before the skies cleared enough that we could venture up to the ice fields themselves. The third day, we set out across the ice fields and made the Gordon Summit, one of the highest mountains surrounding the ice fields. On the way back, we made a little detour climbing up one of the slopes to catch a few lines heading back to the hut. My friend made the first few cuts at the top before heading down on the right side of the major convex of the slope. No problems. I decided to follow, heading across the convex. First idiot mistake. And head down the left fall line. Well, on my first big cut across the face, past the theoretical shear point. The theoretical shear point became the real shear point, and I felt the entire slope begin to move under me. The next few seconds were a complete blur. I remember staying on top for a few seconds before being violently ragdolled down the slope a few hundred feet before coming to a rest. Whatever you might think about response time, generally there is none. I think I had a split second of control before I was gone. There was nothing I could do to prevent myself from getting sucked in. Fortunately, we all had beacons, and my ski ended up sticking out right near where I'd gone under. I was completely disoriented for the first few seconds of being still, but I remember becoming fully around and realized that it was very dark, and the snow was very close to my face. I didn't completely panic, whether it was adrenaline or disorientation, but I was able to somewhat control my breathing. However, as the seconds went by, it literally felt like hours. I really did start to panic, as the realization that I might not survive started to set in. A few seconds/minutes later, I heard some muffled noise and felt some movement on the snow above me. It wasn't long before I was uncovered by two of my friends who saw me go down. In the end, I was under the snow for maybe 2 to 3 minutes in total. I sustained a few cracked/bruised ribs, a sprained elbow, a mild concussion, and a pretty sore neck for a few weeks. It really was a different experience than I thought that it might have been. Doing a fair bit of backcountry skiing, you think about avalanches a lot, but the reality is a lot different than what your mind makes it out to be. There is no time to react for the most part, and when you're under the snow, you quite literally cannot move at all. It's like being encased in concrete, and it is very frightening once the realization sets in. Anyways, that's my story. I live on an island in Maine that's an hour ferry ride out from civilization. The boat comes 3 days a week typically, but there's a lot of times that they cancel due to the weather. This one particular day, they probably should have canceled, and I wouldn't have even got on, but I needed to make a flight for my friend's bachelor party. The swells were washing over the boat, and a couple of times it rocked so far that I had one foot set on the floor and the other on the wall for balance. One of the windows cracked from the force of a wave. I'm not normally too stressed on these boat rides, as I trust the captains to be a good judge and know what they and the boat can handle. But that time in particular really made me consider that I might drown in a freezing ocean. There was supposed to be really bad snow starting around 8 p.m. I was visiting a friend's place about 40 minutes from home, and I left to drive home at about 7. It was snowing, but not that hard. Within 10 minutes, I was trapped in freeway traffic in legit blizzard conditions. Your headlights hit the falling snow, so they don't light up the road very much. The wind is blowing the snow around so much that you can't see where your lane is, where the edge of the road is, anything. You're just desperately staring at a tiny patch of illuminated white in front of you. I accepted that I would probably end up in a ditch, or someone else near me would try to brake and set off a chain of events, leading to all of us colliding. I decided to take the next exit and rent a motel room, but I couldn't get up the hill that the motel was on. I had to turn my wheels and let my car spin out as it slid back down the hill. And then I did my best to get control before the bottom. I got back on the freeway and miraculously got home. My roommate started laughing and said, "How the heck did you just drive home?" A few years ago around Thanksgiving, it snowed a foot overnight. I was homeless at the time, riding my bike trailing a heavy bike cart that had a flat tire as the sun was going down, and snow was starting to fall, and I was sweating and exhausted because of the flat. I pulled into a parking lot to rest for a bit, unzipped my outer jacket, sat down, and promptly fell asleep. I woke up in the middle of the night with half a foot of snow on top of me. It took something like 10 minutes for me to be able to move any part of my body at all. I managed to eventually stand up, grab a blanket from my cart, and drag myself into a dumpster enclosure to wrap up in my blanket, between the dumpster and the wall. I don't know how I didn't freeze to death that night. I was driving home with my family after visiting my sister who lives a town over. I was learning how to drive, had a pretty good handle on it, and my stepdad let me drive there to get used to winter highway driving, so naturally I drove back as well. The storm wasn't supposed to start until later that evening, so we thought that it would be fine. It started snowing when we left, which wasn't terrible because I was capable of driving in the snow, but it picked up fast. We had just left town, and there were maybe 10 minutes into the drive before it became a complete whiteout. I'm driving in the left lane. It's 8 p.m., middle of January, so it's pitch black and peak winter where I live. Not to mention, these are Canadian highways. The only lights you get, for a long stretch, are going to be your headlights. I was doing my absolute best not to panic, and I was shocked at the level of calm that I was able to muster. My stepdad was doing his best to guide me and try to find a safe place to pull over, but the winds were blowing snow everywhere, so we couldn't see the ditches or the lines. I had two worries. One, I'm in the left lane, so if I pull over, I might not know how far exactly to go and might throw us into a ditch that's completely filled with snow. And two, I can't see the lines at all, and if I keep driving, I might not stay in the correct lane because of that. The only thing I could do was keep driving until I was absolutely certain that it was safe to pull over. I was using the rumble strips as my only guide, since the tires were able to get a slight feel for them. Driving 30 kilometers per hour in a 90 zone. My stepdad is guiding me to the road his parents live on, so we can have a better place to stop. We passed maybe 8 cars in the ditch between my sister's town and my grandparents' road. At some point, the road was completely covered, and the rumble strips weren't noticed anymore either, so I was just going off of instinct. I ended up hitting a sheet of ice at an awkward angle and spun out into the oncoming lane, got control of the car, saw faint headlights, and said, "Yep, wrong lane, shouldn't be here at all," and quickly but safely moved us into the proper lane. My mom's in the back seat freaking out because we just spun out. My stepdad is surprisingly less chill than me, but trying to keep us cool. Doing everything he can not to grab the wheel in a panic. I can barely see an inch from the front of the car. Finally managed to get to his parents' road and pull over. We got out to switch places, and when I stepped out of the vehicle, the snow was up to my shins. Ended up staying the night at my grandparents' house, because there was no way that we were making it back home alive if we tried. Found out about 15 minutes after getting in that they closed off the highways due to poor conditions. We had to dig our way out of the house the next morning to go home. I got to stay home from school that day since I was stuck out of town. Meanwhile, everyone else had to go in. It was my first winter with my learners and my first blizzard drive. If we had a smaller car, we never would have made it to my grandparents to begin with. I was terrified, but I was not going to let my parents know that, especially with my mom in the backseat scared. I never should have driven that night, but it helped me learn how to handle those kind of drives later on, and I became a better driver because of it. It was a trip though, that's for sure, and one that I'll never forget. I was driving up to a ski hill after a snowstorm. Not having a great amount of money at the time, I hadn't invested in winter tires. There was a tractor trailer in front of me, a car to my left, and another car behind. Something shifted in the passenger seat, so I took my eyes off of the road for a moment. The right wheels crossed into the shoulder and lost traction. The car drifted to the right, onto the shoulder. I would have gone into the guardrail, but the snow had piled up against it, forming a natural curb that my car bounced off of. Between steering the car back towards where I wanted it to go and the car bouncing off the snowbank, my car, still without proper traction, started drifting left. The truck ahead had begun to slow, but I didn't want to brake for fear of losing what little traction I did have. So my car makes its way sideways across the lane, and I prepare for whatever's going to happen when I sideswipe the vehicle one lane over. But just as I hit the center of the lane, my tires managed to grip the road again, and I resume moving straight forward, tapping my brakes at this point to prevent myself from rear-ending the truck, which was now right in my face. It feels like an eternity typing it out like this, but the whole event couldn't have taken more than a few seconds. In the end, the only thing that my car made contact with, other than the road, was that snowbank, and it didn't even leave a mark. And when I got home from the ski hill, I bought myself snow tires, because even though snow tires are expensive, there was no way that I was letting that happen to me again. I had to drive through a mountain pass in a blizzard once. Conditions weren't great beforehand, but they were manageable enough and holding steady. For the first few miles of the pass, it was pretty standard. Squalls from wind gusts, but no fresh snow falling. Then all heck broke loose. It started snowing again. It was night, the wind was up, and literally everything outside the car was shifting and moving like TV static. I couldn't see the road. I could barely see the end of my own car. There was absolutely nothing but whiteness outside, and it was making me feel dizzy because there was just no sense of direction anymore. Oh yeah, to my left was a wall of rock, and to my right was a huge drop. And I'd never driven in a blizzard before. I had never even really driven in heavy snow before. It was so unbelievably tempting to stop, but I'd actually read from some more experienced blizzard drivers on Reddit that stopping is the worst thing you can do, because you'll just get bogged down as the snow continues to fall. In fact, we passed a car abandoned at the side of the road that seemed to have fallen into the same trap. The people weren't stuck there. We slowed to check. I ended up being saved by a semi-driver who let all the smaller cars ride in a convoy inches from his bumper. Everyone followed in the deep tire tracks and stayed close enough to the car to see the rear lights. Considering we were all going at about 2 miles per hour at the most, it worked out. It took 2.5 hours to go about 35 miles. After getting out of the pass, there was still another couple of hours to go, but they were easy compared to that. When we reached our destination, I had a stiff drink for the nerves for the first time in my life and went straight to bed. It was the scariest driving experience of my life. Huge shout out to that truck driver. I lived in Utah in 1999. We got over 2 feet of snow very late in the season. Dad took us out of school to go skiing. The mountain, Alta, was closed because they lacked enough crew to handle all of the new snowfall. The ski patrol said that we were free to hike up a single groomed path on the main face. On our way up, 2 skiers high above us triggered a slide onto us. We were swept about 40 yards into a grove of trees. Probably why I survived. My dad and I were buried up to our chests and shoulders. We were upright, but pinned in packed snow. I didn't know if my brother was alive for 5 minutes. I just sat. Nothing I could do. My brother was buried about 2 feet deep. He spit so that he knew which way was up. A lot of people die in avalanches because they're disoriented and dig the wrong way. After my brother freed himself, He found us about 10 yards up. Ski Patrol and several others in the mountain found us in 10 minutes. They had to use shovels to free us. When an avalanche stops, it is unbelievably packed. We ended up being on the news that night, and my teachers knew that I wasn't homesick. I was pretty new at driving, and coming home from work late one night, I decided it was the perfect time for my first drive across the lake, Minnesota. Things were okay for the first few minutes, but as I got closer to the center of the lake, I started getting nervous. It was really hard to see anything except for the plowed path in front of me, and I realized that I had no idea where I was going to come off at the lake, or if the path even went all the way across the lake. So I decided that I would turn around and go home. As soon as I backed up off the plowed area to turn around, I was stuck in over a foot of snow. I tried rocking the car, tried putting my floor mat under the tire, which just ended up flinging the mat 20 feet behind me. Tried digging out the snow with my scraper. The only thing I succeeded in doing was breaking a fingernail off, causing my finger to start bleeding. This was way before cell phones, so I finally decided that I needed to start walking towards home. I was probably 3 or so miles away. Unfortunately for me, the wind chill was about -20, and I don't know if you've ever tried to walk across a frozen lake on a windy night, but a lake is pretty flat, and there's nothing to shield you from the wind. By the time that I got off the lake, I was seriously thinking that I was going to die of hypothermia. Not long after, I reached an area of houses, and my extremely introverted, shy, socially awkward self bravely decided that I needed to knock on a door for help. Someone finally answered. I explained my predicament and asked if I could use their phone. I called home, feeling relieved that help was within reach and enjoying the warmth of this stranger's house. And my younger brother answered. I told him to go get Dad. He said, "Nope, haha." I told him that he wasn't funny and I needed help, and he hung up on me. I called back, but he must have left the phone off the hook because I only got a busy signal. After trying a few more times and feeling increasingly awkward, I decided that the only thing I could do was walk the rest of the way home. So I did. My burning hatred of my brother and plans to beat him up, keeping me warm. I made it home with only one little spot of frostbite on my finger. Had a hole in my glove. My brother got read the riot act by my dad, as did I for driving onto the lake. And the next day, Dad drove me back to get my car, which thankfully hadn't been towed. I haven't had any interest in driving on a lake ever since. I'm sharing my survival story from a couple of days ago. My friend wanted to go camping on a 2-day, one-night trip during a snowstorm to test our gear to the fullest. We were not using tents, but instead using hammocks, sleeping bags, tarps, and ropes. I was in Northern California with a friend a bit above the forest ranch and camping somewhere between 6,000 and 6,500 feet in Laysan National Park. There was already about 4 inches of snow on the ground when we arrived. We parked my red car on a large turnout and grabbed our gear and headed east off the road, which is the only highway that went through the whole forest region. We walked in about a half mile from the road in the thick forest with the occasional clear-cut trees from logging. We started on hanging the tarps for rain/snow cover. We spent a couple of hours starting the fire because everything was wet and almost impossible to get the fire going. Then we put up the hammocks. But my friend forgot his, so he had to use some thick painting tarps to rig one up. I knew it was going to take him a while to get it going, so I went for a hike alone to go to the top of the mountain and look around and also gather things for camp. It's an hour before sundown. I told him, I will be back in an hour, and I have my gun, but I'm not going to shoot it. we saw bear droppings near camp. I headed out with a thermal top and bottom, a boxers, beanie, t-shirt, hoodie, wool socks with a small bag around each of them, hiking boots, snowboarding jacket and snowboarding pants, gloves, not waterproof at all, Smith & Wesson pocket knife, not very sharp, a Glock 19 with 10 rounds in a holster, bright waterproof headlamp, iPod, and headphones. I head up the mountain listening to music, just chilling and enjoying nature. I leave snow tracks except when I get to areas with no snow, because the trees above caught it all. I get to the top, about 1 to 1.5 miles from camp, and turn around and enjoy the view. By then, my gloves were frozen solid and cannot be used anymore, so my hands are starting to freeze. It's time to head back to camp. I follow my footsteps in the snow back until I got to a very large area with no snow and couldn't pick back up on my tracks. I have a pretty good sense of direction, so I continue in the general area that camp was in. I keep walking for another 20 minutes and it starts raining, and I realize that I'm lost. I start yelling stuff in groups of 3 to get a response from my friend. Then the sun was down, and it gets dark up there fast. I take my gun out and fire 1 shot and wait for a response. No response. I'm lost in the woods at night. I turn on my headlamp and try to signal with that. No luck. So I put the headlamp on and start walking and backpacking, yelling the entire time. A few hours pass by and I still can't find the camp in the pitch dark. I realize that I'm not sleeping at camp tonight. I'm sleeping in the woods. It's windy and snowing with a temperature well below 30 degrees Fahrenheit, and I start to question if it's even possible to spend a night in these conditions. I try to take down little pine trees with my knife, but it's a cheap knife that did not cut very well, even after sharpening. So I resort to only being able to take snow-covered saplings out of the ground while still barehanded and freezing. I am soaked from head to toe. The waterproof jacket, pants, and boots did not keep water out. I eventually rip out about 11 saplings and lay them on the ground next to a tree that doesn't have snow under it. This is my bed tonight. I close up my jacket, put my hood all the way on, and put my hands in the cold, watery pockets and get in a fetal position under the tree. You go to a dark place in your mind when you know that you're near death. I can barely admit to the thoughts that I was having. Very dark, and never want to go there again. I'm beyond freezing and soaked. I'm shivering so much, it was almost like a seizure. It was a very hard night, having to move my muscles and toes every few minutes to keep the blood flow and prevent frostbite, and hope that I didn't get hypothermia. Somehow I woke up in the morning. I realized that this was not all a dream, and I am still lost in the wild, and there was over 2 inches of snow or so on the ground. I've followed my tracks multiple times and have 2 to 5 sets of tracks on any path that I took. I admit to walking in circles when I tried a straight walk line. I knew that I could no longer follow my tracks. I had to choose a direction and go for it. I eventually got to a logging road. It was a wide road, at least 15 feet wide. I had a feeling that it might lead back to the highway, or it'll go further into the forest, so I had to choose right. Based on the sun's position, I had to go north or south on this road. I chose to go south and hoped that it was correct. I walked for over 5 miles on this road, making signals like my name and an arrow in the direction that I was going, and big SOS in the snow, also yelling in groups of 3 the whole time. I eventually hit a car traveling on the highway, way in the distance, and that was the sound of relief. I kept walking and eventually got to the highway. I stood right on the double yellow lines and put my most miserable face on to get someone to stop. A Dish Network truck eventually stopped, and he took me up the road to my parked car. I got out, headed out towards our camp again, and fired another shot from the gun. A victory that I'm still alive shot. I yelled, and my friend responded, and I made it back to camp with my life and limbs. By far, the scariest near-death experience I have ever had. If you have any questions about it, I will try to answer them. I'll keep this short and sweet. A few years back, we were having a brutally cold winter. The snow had frozen into ice and it covered everything. It was pitch black in the backyard when I went to let my dog outside one last time before bed that evening. As we exited the house from the sliding door of the walkout basement and onto the lower deck, I felt that something was off. Our house backs up to some woods, so I was accustomed to hearing noises from wildlife in the night. This night was different. Nothing made a sound except the Arctic cold wind, but I had a feeling that I was being watched. The entire time, my dog was in the backyard. I looked around nervously, expecting a coyote or other predator to pop out of the tree line. My dog did his business, but afterwards stopped and stared at a corner of the woods until I got creeped out and called him back inside. I quickly locked the sliding door and shut the curtains, unable to shake the uneasy feeling that I had outside. After double and triple checking all the doors and locks in the house, I went to bed. At around 3 o'clock in the morning, I hear the muffled sound of my dog barking from the basement 2 floors below. I got up, stumbled down 3 flights of stairs, and found him standing at the basement sliding door. He was peeking his head through the closed curtains, barking his head off with the hairs standing up all along his back. I tried calling him away from the door, but he wouldn't let up. I dreaded peeking out the curtain to see what he was barking at, after the uneasy feeling I had earlier in the night. Finally, I held my breath and swiped the curtain aside. I peered into the inky blackness, but saw nothing to cause any alarm. A wave of relief washed over me. I figured it must have been a deer or raccoon in the backyard that set him off. He whined at the door for a few more minutes until I bribed him upstairs with a dog cookie. I went back to bed and wasn't disturbed again. That is, until this morning, when I went to the basement to let the dog out. I opened the sliding door and walked out onto the deck as he bounded into the snow. My blood ran as cold as the sub-zero morning temperatures when I looked down. There, frozen into the ice on the deck, was a set of bare human footprints. They were very clear. I could make out each toe on the person's foot. The prints were large and appeared to be from an adult male. Looking around, I noticed that they started at the base of the deck, went to the sliding door and the window of the basement living room, then seemed to disappear off the side of the deck. I had my snow boots on, so I walked around the yard, but I could find no trace of the footprints in the snow once they left the deck. Keep in mind, the daily temperatures that winter barely made it above 0 degrees Fahrenheit, and the wind chill made it feel close to 20 below. Frostbite would set in within a matter of minutes for anyone walking around barefoot, especially in the dead of the night. I never experienced anything like that again, but I did adopt a second dog shortly thereafter. I used to work on the north slope of Alaska in the oil industry. The work we were doing required us to travel far out into the Alaskan Petroleum Reserve, which is basically just untamed tundra wilderness for hundreds of miles. The oil companies would build these long ice roads in the winter that would lead to exploration drilling pads. Our job was to go out after they finished the initial drilling and test rock formations for their oil-producing qualities. It was mid-January. The sun hadn't quite come up yet, and when I say the sun hadn't come up, I mean in almost a month and a half. Polar nights are intense. The particular well site we were traveling to was about 60 miles west of Alpine, Alaska, deep in the wilderness. Our job took a week, but we finished and were headed back to camp to finish our hitch and go home. At the beginning and end of the ice roads are guard shacks that you have to check in and out of for safety. No cell reception and radios only work up to a distance. If you don't check in or out in a set time, they come looking for you to ensure that you're not a popsicle. It was about 4 a.m, not that it mattered in the land of endless night, and we were halfway across the ice road. Travel was slow as the speed limit on the roads is only 25 miles per hour, when something appeared on the road in our headlights. It was a man, in jeans, sneakers, and a hoodie jacket, walking down an ice road in wilderness tundra at 4 a.m, and it was negative 20 degrees outside. It's not unusual for the local Inuit people to be out this far hunting. Maybe his snowmobile broke down, and he's trying to get back to the guard shack. That seemed plausible. He didn't acknowledge us as our trucks rolled up next to him. He just kept shuffling forward. He didn't seem cold. His clothing, while totally not appropriate for this extreme weather, appeared warm and dry. We also noticed that he wasn't Inuit, but Caucasian. I rolled down my window and asked if he needed any help and if he was okay. He still didn't acknowledge us, just kept shuffling forward. His face was completely blank, devoid of any thought or emotions. The other guys in my truck suggested that maybe he was in an accident and in shock. I continued rolling my truck alongside him as he trudged down the road, still trying to get his attention. Even in this extreme cold, I could occasionally get whiffs of a peculiar smell coming off of him. He smelled acidic, if that makes sense. There was just a lot about this guy that made the hair on my neck stand up. The guy behind me in the truck's crew cab had had enough of all this. He rolled down his window and reached out to grab the guy. He later said that he was just going to try to shake him out of his stupor. Before my buddy's hand could reach him, though, this walking popsicle spun around and latched onto my buddy's outstretched arm. He glared at my buddy, and then at me with this look of pure rage, not removing his hand from his arm. If emotions had a physical temperature, this guy could have melted the entire tundra that night. My buddy groaned in pain as he tried to get his arm free from Mr. Popsicle. At that moment, this guy starts screaming in our faces. There was so much hate and rage and anger in that scream. It was absolutely terrifying. I slammed on the gas and spun out on the ice for a second before the wheels caught and launched us forward. Popsicle Dude still had a hold of my buddy's arm and was trying to pull him out of the truck. He was running along the side of the truck while the other guys in the cab held onto my buddy to keep him inside. After several moments, it could have only been a few seconds at most, my buddy tore free from this guy, and we hauled to get to the guard shack another 30 miles down the road. We checked in with the guards and reported what we had just seen. The guard was looking at us like we were pulling a prank, but policy said that they had to check it out regardless. My buddy's arm was sore, and when we pulled back his sleeve, there were noticeable bruises in the shape of a hand around his arm. We filed a report with the guard and were told to head back to our camp. None of us really wanted to talk about what happened, and it was quite a drive the rest of the way. We flew home the next day. The next time we saw the guard at this shack, we asked him if they ever saw Mr. Popsicle on his patrols. He told us that they searched up and down that ice road for a solid 12-hour shift and saw nothing, not even tracks in the snow leading off the road. He told us it was a good prank and that he'd get us back for making him waste a shift driving around. But it wasn't a prank. Who would make up a story like that? And who would willingly bruise their arm for a dumb prank? We never got a satisfying answer to what happened that evening. I still wonder about that dude, if he even was a dude. The Alaskan tundra is a weird place, and that was just one of my many weird stories from my time up there. I'll work to write down more of my experiences and share them to the appropriate subreddits. This incident happened to me over the Christmas holidays this past year, and it just occurred to me that the sheer insanity of it might make it a good fit for this subreddit. For reference, I'm a 24-year-old female. My cousin and I decided to go up a few hours north for a nice winter cabin weekend. It went great. Nothing creepy at all. On our final day, we packed up at 6 a.m. and hopped in the car to get an early start on the roughly 5-hour drive that we had ahead of us. It was a foggy morning. Not actively snowing, but previous snowfalls had piled up quite a bit, making the drive a little risky in the dark early hours of the morning. My cousin was driving, and we were chatting and listening to podcasts, not too aware of our surroundings. We were about 20 minutes into the drive when, unfortunately, the car skidded off the road a little bit. Stupid black ice. And we were very slightly grazed a tree. We got out to take a look, and by some miracle there was no damage or anything on the car. As my cousin and started to laugh with relief, we were just thanking our luck. I shielded my eyes because some idiot with their crazy high beams was coming up behind us. So obnoxious, my cousin laughed, starting to open her door and step back in when the blinding headlight car honks and continues to keep at us as they approach us. My cousin and I looked at each other, super confused, but quickly hopped back in the car. The car begins to slow down, and we're able to see a man in the driver's seat, and he finally takes his hand off of his horn and pulls up right next to my cousin's car, which is really dumb because we were off the road and it was crazy slippery. He rolls down his window and motions for my cousin to roll down hers. We figure it's fine because he's still in his car and we're in ours. I know, still probably a stupid move. "Hey there, ladies. In a rush this morning?" He laughs. Not really, just trying to get home. Can we help you with something?" My cousin replies, totally stone cold poker face. "Oh no, I just noticed you dropped something 2 kilometers back. It fell out of your trunk." My cousin turned to look at me. "Did you shut the trunk when we left?" "Yeah, dude, obviously," I replied. And knowing that the way the car is shaped, we would have definitely seen and definitely heard an open trunk. "No thanks, sir. I think you might have us mixed up with someone else," my cousin said and immediately rolled up her window. This man just gave off bad vibes. He started blaring his horn again and motioning for us to roll down the window. My cousin rolls it down again and sees him holding up some women's underwear and smiling. "See, this look familiar?" I can literally remember the exact tone with which he said that. "No thanks, sir. You have a great day now." My cousin quickly rolled up her window again and floored it, quickly hopping back on the road, and thankfully the man was neither taken aback or just gave up, and we didn't see him for the next hour or so. My cousin and I were both a little shaken up, but tried to laugh it off since we were safe and hadn't seen his car follow us or anything. About 2 hours into the trip, we got off at an exit to fill up gas and grab some breakfast at a Starbucks. My cousin and I mobile ordered, and I was going to quickly run in to grab our food and drinks. It had started snowing at this point, and while the sun had been up for a little bit, it was still foggy and gloomy, making it hard to see the surroundings. I ran in, and as I reached for our food, someone's arm reached over mine to grab a napkin, and I instantly flinched back. When I looked up, I truly almost crapped myself. It was the same man from the road earlier. Despite him never getting out of the car, he did have his lights on, and I was able to get a clear view of his face. It was him, I was sure. "Look at us, just like old friends," he smiled at me. I immediately sat down, grabbed my food, and started walking out of the store. As I left, I heard him talking to the barista saying, "See that beauty queen? That's my beauty queen." What the heck? I almost had tears in my eyes because I was so terrified. I power walked back to the car, almost tripping outside because I was so scared and not walking like a normal person. I hopped in and screamed, "We need to get back on the road. He's inside the Starbucks." My cousin started laughing, thinking that I was pranking her, but she quickly realized that that was not the case when the man walked out of the Starbucks a few seconds later, with no drink or food in hand, walking straight towards our car, waving at us. My cousin quickly started to turn our car on when the man reached into his pocket. I genuinely thought that he would pull out a weapon, holding up the underwear that he had before. Thankfully, my cousin took no time in backing out of there and speeding back onto the highway. We both were freaking out at this point, not sure how he ended up at the same stop at us, despite us not seeing him behind us at all. He could have taken some sort of back roads that we didn't know about, but it would have taken him much longer than us to get there. Unless he was trailing behind us. I don't know. We quickly tried to find an alternate route on our Maps app, and thankfully there was one that made us go through some local roads, which we hoped might help. Of course, with our luck, as we were going through a smaller town, I felt the car getting gradually lower on my side. We pulled over at a well-lit gas station and realized that we were losing air in one of the tires. We were both too scared to get out, but figured if we went out together, it might be less scary. So we did. We filled up the tire with some air and it seemed to be okay. We got back in the car, back on our way. Everything seemed fine until 10 minutes later, when this car seemed to appear out of nowhere directly behind us. My cousin and I looked at each other, having no idea what to do if it were the man. Our suspicions were confirmed when he blared his stupid horn yet again, then quickly swerved off the road to get right next to us. So this time he was on my side. He had his window rolled down and was screaming at us. At this point, I didn't care and called my brother-in-law, who's a cop. I know I should have called the police directly. It was a stupid move. But in the moment, I was just trying to justify this as not being that serious. My brother-in-law told us to drive directly to the nearest police station and to call them right away so that they would be alert. Literally, as he was instructing me, the creep braked his car, just stopped on the side of the snowy, icy road. We were still speeding away, so it quickly got harder and harder to see him. But from what I could make out, he had gotten out of his car and was sitting on the hood. Just sitting on the hood of his car in freezing, snowy weather. My cousin and I did not want to stop or do anything with about an hour left in our journey. We decided to just book it straight home, and thankfully, that was the end of that. I know we made a lot of stupid mistakes that could have potentially had horrible consequences, but I am super happy that we made it out alive and unharmed. I still don't know how he caught up to us seemingly magically, and why he just sat there at the end, but I don't even want to find out at this point. This is currently happening right now. Not the worst thing in this subreddit, but it's a constant creepy problem. I'm a 25-year-old female sitting by myself in a bar. I find myself doing this quite often, even if I'm not drinking. I'm a smoker, and when I don't want to be alone after work, I'll often pop into a bar, grab a drink or a snack, and smoke a cigarette or two. I'm friendly, and I get a kick out of the tipsy people making quick friends at the bar. My favorite bar has this adorable outside area that's usually empty, even though the bar is busy. I love going out there, sitting in the sun, smoking a cigarette and browsing Reddit. There's this 60-year-old man or so who followed me out here. He was staring at me for a while, which I tried to ignore. Then when I looked back up, he was still staring and licking his lips. I just looked back over, his hand in his pocket moving around. He's still licking his lips and breathing hard. I'm finishing my Sprite and heading out now. It's just so creepy, and unfortunately not uncommon to have unspoken creepy as heck encounters at bars. I'm disgusted, and I'm mad that this is such an issue where I live. So this happened when I was around 19 or 20 and just started going out. At the time, I had finished 6th form and was taking a gap year for financial reasons before starting uni. My friends had all come over for the weekend, and we all planned to go out and hit our small town clubs. First place we get to, we start catching up and getting shots and having a great time. One thing I should note is that when clubbing, I hate having actual drinks, like a beer or vodka and Coke, unless we're sitting down and I can watch my friends. At this part of the night, we were constantly on the dance floor, with nowhere to put a drink, so I was on shots for the rest of the night. While dancing, this guy starts dancing with me and my friend. Okay, pretty normal. He then starts trying to dance with just me, and keeps getting in front of me, blocking my friend. Slowly, he starts backing me away from my friends and away from the dance floor. I initially didn't notice because I kept trying to get away and get back to my friend. That was my biggest mistake. I am by no means a short person, but I was underweight for my height, and this guy, who is at least 6'2", decides that he wants a kiss. I now properly try and get away from him, in which he picks me up and carries me, fighting me to a corner to try to force himself on me. I froze. I didn't know what to do other than try and fight him off. But as he has me cornered and no one can really see me where we are, I start frantically pushing and clawing at him to get him off of me, and these two women there see me. I send a look of pure fright and help me. They come over, and one has to almost push the guy off me. Her friend grabs my hand and puts me behind her, and was asking if I knew him. I said no. The guy looks absolutely angry. He starts trying to get me back to him, and both girls stand in the way, saying no, else we're gonna get bouncers to throw him out. He gives up and walks away. Both women are asking me what happened and asking if I was okay. I thank them so much for the help that they gave me, realizing that I was in trouble and stayed with me until I found my friends. After they left me, I think they told the bouncers what happened, because I see him outside looking angry as heck. I stick to my friend's side like glue till we leave, and then every time we went out since when living in that town. She managed to get a stalker of her own at some point. I'm sure if I had a drink, he would have tried to spike it in hopes of making me more willing. So, dude in the club, let's never meet again. This happened in early January, when I, a 25-year-old male, was on holiday. I had befriended some locals and went clubbing with them. A few hours in, a balding, sturdy man who looked to be in his 50s danced with me. He smiled at me and put both of his arms around my shoulders. I smiled back. After the song, he still held me and danced along. I laughed it off and endured this for another minute or two, and finally tried to move away. The man tightened his grip, kept smiling, kept dancing, his arms sort of locking me in. This was the first time that something like this was happening to me, so I was stunned. I told him, okay, that's enough, still smiling, and tried to shrug him off. Again, he held me hard. I slapped his hands away and told him, no, that's enough. But he sort of just wove around my hands and replaced his grip on my shoulders. He pulled me close, hugged me, was whispering something I couldn't hear, and put his head against my neck. I shoved him at this point and swore at him. He looked dejected. I retreated to my local friends and tried to pretend that that hadn't happened. The man returned, grabbing my hands and pulling, motioning to go outside with him. I ignored him. He hovered around me, frowning at me, and really I tried to put on my best brave face. Finally, he slid up to me, touched my butt, and left the club. The night was pretty much ruined for me by then, but I continued to fake it and dance. I walked back to my hotel some hours later with my local friends, keeping an eye out for the man, but he was gone, and I didn't mention this to anyone. This is my first post here. My memory was jogged by the recent story of the girl whose drink was spiked, and she passed out, and her friends took her home, thankfully. I had just turned 21, and obviously wanted to celebrate by going to the most popular dance club in my town with a couple of girlfriends. I had never had a fake ID or anything, so this was my first clubbing experience. We get inside and order drinks. I ordered a girly type bottled drink. We drank for a bit and then hit the dance floor. So I had been taught about safety while out at the club. I knew all the things to watch out for. A tip that a coworker had once given me was to put your thumb partially in the neck of your bottled drink if you're not going to be paying close attention to it, as it disables access for anyone who might want to slip something in there. So that is exactly what I did the entire night. A few guys had asked us girls to dance and we obliged. Eventually, the second guy that I ended up dancing with gave me a weird vibe. He tried to buy me a drink, saying that he would go to the bar and get it for me. I declined. He asked if he could hold my drink for me while we danced, seeing as how I had a wristlet in my other hand, and he just wanted to be helpful. I declined. He was pushy. I got the weirder vibe after those couple of different passes, and when the song changed, I left him saying I needed to go find my friends. My friends and I hung out for a while, then went back out onto the dance floor. Lo and behold, but who should slide up but him? So here I am, a 21-year-old with no clubbing experience, no huge dating experience, feeling uncomfortable while this guy dances with me. I didn't assert myself. I was intimidating. It was a really crappy feeling. I let him dance near me, kind of vaguely dancing but avoiding eye contact, keeping an eye on my friends, both of whom were dancing nearby. And that's when he got all touchy-feely. He put one hand on my waist, not aggressively, but it made me even more uncomfortable, and kind of took my free hand, wristlet was hanging on my wrist, in his, and he made a few, woohoo, look at us, we're dancing type of motions. Then he switched. His hand ran down my other arm, lightly grasped my hand, the hand that was holding my drink, and I feel his fingers slide until he's touching my bottle. My stomach turned over, but I kept dancing, not really knowing what to do. And that's how it went. Every so often, he would feel around my hand and bottle, my thumb firmly lodged in there, and then let go. After about a minute of this, I felt his forefinger and thumb grasp my bottle thumb, as if to confirm/test that my thumb was indeed in the way. And at that moment, the song changed. I saw my friend in my peripheral vision. I made eye contact with him and we shared a moment that really made me feel like he was thinking, I know you just got to know what I'm trying to do. I fled in the direction of my friend. We found my other friend and we went to another club. I can't think of any other reason that he would want to have his hands near my own hands or my drink. He wanted to drug my drink. I wonder how many other girls he had tried with that night. I certainly hope that he never succeeded. So creep at the club? Let's not meet. I'm not sure how creepy this actually is, but I always try and play it safe. I don't believe in taking chances, and I don't intend on becoming another statistic. If that means playing on one side of caution, then so be it. I'm a bartender by trade. I've been working in bars since I was 21. I'm 29 currently and female, so I've had to pick up a thing or two. I get a fair amount of unwanted attention in my day-to-day life. I'd say about as much as the average woman gets. I'm not a vain person, but I do put a lot of attention into my wardrobe, my makeup, and my nails. I know it's such a sideways way of thinking, but most of my money is made on tips, and I have to make myself presentable enough. But because of this, I do set my boundaries very strongly. This doesn't mean that I'm perfect, though. I'm still a person with people urges. It was a typical Saturday night. The bar that I currently work at, and the one that I've been working at for the past 2 years, is a pretty small bar with more of an emphasis on the quality of the drinks and the relaxed atmosphere. I don't serve as many Vegas bombs or Bud Lights that I have at previous bars that I've worked at. It's mostly cocktails and craft beers. This usually keeps the rowdy crowd out. On Saturdays, we do trivia night, which I occasionally get tasked with hosting. It's not my favorite thing to do, but something I have to do as per my job description. There was a girl in the crowd that was answering most of the questions that I sent out. She wasn't alone, came in with a group of people, all seemingly in their mid-20s. Her and I ended up talking for a while at the bar, in between serving drinks. She was flirty, which isn't something that I'm incredibly good at, but she was sweet. And just to make it clear, I have an equal preference in men and women. I wasn't trying to lead her on or humor her for the sake of making tips. In the crowd of trivia participants came this one guy. I wasn't the one to ID him, so I couldn't tell you his name. He began making rude remarks from one bar stool down from where this girl was sitting. He was somewhere in his 30s. It seemed like he was hitting on her, but she didn't seem very responsive. I told him that she didn't seem interested and that he should stop. He apologized with a very sinister-looking smile and looked down at my chest, claiming that he was looking for a name tag to formally address me. We don't have name tags. I told him that if he continued making people uncomfortable, he would be removed. One thing that I took notice of that made me sufficiently uncomfortable was the fact that he kept one hand in his jacket pocket. Just the one. And he seemed to be fiddling with something. I don't play around with this kind of stuff, so I told security about it. While I was walking back, I overheard him telling another bar patron that I basically told him that I would sleep with him when I got off of shift. The girl from the bar, as well as the random bar goer, told him that his behavior was out of line. I told him that he needed to leave, and that security was going to kick him out. His response changed from sinisterly playful to outright agitated. He made a comment about my sexuality, and told the random bar guy that he was sitting near that he was a homophobic slur. I hate guys like this with a passion. People who want to disrupt the comfort of others in some half-hearted attempt at getting laid. I walked from behind the bar and told him to leave, and tried again to flag security. He made a very crude comment about me letting him do some stuff to me, and in return, I wouldn't feel the need to be attracted to women. Unless it was, let's just say, a group effort. The girl that I had been talking to threw a glass of scotch in his face, and then headbutted him in the mouth. Security finally came running, only to try to kick her out. I flew into a rage over that, and told him that the girl was good, and she was only doing the job that he was supposed to be doing. He was removed from the bar. I kept an eye on him through the window. He stuck around near the bar for a bit, but after an hour or so he left. The girl offered to stay with me until closing, which wasn't necessary. I'd closed the place down so many times at 2 to 3 a.m., but I gave her the, "Oh, would you please" routine. I also give credit where it's due. So I gave the other guy from the bar a good thank you hug before he left, and told him that he made me feel safer. The girl told him the same. I told the manager and the owner that we had an issue with a customer. Bar cam footage was pulled, and his identity was confirmed. He had an issue with getting banned from bars, and had a tendency to start fights while intoxicated. I hate to say it, but I'm still keeping an eye out for him. Not sure if this is creepy enough, but it was for me. So this happened to me at my first club experience. Background info. I'm a 20-year-old female, and I was 19 at the time, and I barely reached 5'1". The size is important later on. I live in a city that has some pretty lit clubs, and in the downtown core we have 2 universities. There's this one club that is super cool, but packed with university students, and primarily creepy guys, unfortunately. I'm assuming most clubs are like this. This club was a house at some point that has been transformed into a club with different floors/sections, like a dance/EDM area, a piano bar, a seating area with pool and a top patio, some other areas too, I believe. One of my girlfriends had just turned 19, and she was the last of us, so we decided to go downtown and party at this really cool place. Totally makes sense. There was a big group of us, probably 10 girls and maybe 3 guys. Unfortunately, my boyfriend didn't come with me on this particular occasion, and I've always wished that he had since then. At the club, I was primarily with my two closer friends, Jamie and Lee. At some point, Jamie and I lost Lee, but it was fine. We were dancing and having a good/okay time. I was starting to feel anxious, and I just wanted to go back to my boyfriend's place. Lee wasn't answering her phone, and I didn't want to leave Jamie until we found Lee and they were together. Jamie and I were in the EDM area at this point and started making our way across the dance floor, holding hands so that we didn't get separated. Then this guy just starts dancing with Jamie, being a little pushy but not creepy pushy, and Jamie starts dancing with him, still holding my hand. Then they start making out, and Jamie is still holding on to me. This entire time I'm thinking, what the heck? This is so weird. Out of nowhere, I see this figure move towards us, and he's much, much taller than I am. Probably 6'5". Definitely seemed taller than my boyfriend, who is 6'3". He kind of looms over and bends down, slightly, and in the creepiest tone goes, "Hi, how are you?" in my ear. I think I said fine and tried to ignore him, but he wrapped his arms around my waist. And when I say wrapped, I mean tightly, breath-crushingly, nearly double wrapped his arms around me. Then he starts to straight up pull me back into a corner, not even dancing to the beat, but pulling me with all of his might, trying to get me into the back. I don't think I've ever been so scared of someone, even though this was such a small moment. Thankfully, Jamie is still holding onto my hand while making out with this guy. I started to lose my grip though, and we almost let go of each other until I could feel her tighten her hand in mine and start tugging me away. The guy she was with finally left her, or she pulled him away, not totally sure. And with all of her weight, she ripped me out of this guy's arms, and I went flying across into her. This was such a small, probably not terrifying moment, but as someone who is extremely short and tiny, making me vulnerable, it definitely scared the heck out of me. Especially the lack of dancing, and just sheer force of pulling me back. Maybe he just wanted to make out. Maybe it was more, but who knows? When I was in my early 20s, me and some friends went out to celebrate my birthday. We went to a couple of parties since it was the weekend, then bar hopped the rest of the night. While we were at a bar, we met a group of guys that offered to buy us drinks. No biggie, and heck yeah, it was my birthday. We danced around with them for a bit before retreating back to our little section. One of the guys came over to our section and asked me to dance again. I told him maybe in a bit, and went back to partying with my girl. We didn't see them again until the club closed. The group of guys came over to us, and of course, we're trying to find someone to go home with. The same guy that approached me earlier had approached me again. I laughed it off and thanked him for a good time. By this time, we were all getting into the car. We had a designated driver, and they made sure that each of us got home safe after the club. 3 nights later, me and my then boyfriend were knocked out as I had work the next morning. My boyfriend worked nights, but he was off this night. 3:41 a.m. There's a knock at the door. My boyfriend goes to answer it, and I'm walking behind him, wondering who could possibly be at the door at that time of night. We lived in a not-so-good area, so the porch lights would work when they wanted to, and now was not one of those times. As my boyfriend opens the door, the person at the door says, "Excuse me, ma'am, I can't get my car to start." And as he looks up, I immediately recognize him as the man from the club. I scream, and my boyfriend catches on and closes the door. Me and him had had a few laughs when I told him about the guy at the club. So when I told him that it was him, he opened the door back up, I guess to confront him, but he was gone. We hadn't seen a car, but again, it was dark. I don't know how this man found out where I lived, other than following us home that night. I still get the chills thinking what may have happened if my boyfriend wasn't there that night. This happened to me when I lived in Prague. I was out with the girls. We had secured a bench in the back, which in and of itself is a miracle. I offered to go get drinks because this boat club filled up fast. So I get my friend and I a drink. I'm standing by the bar with 2 drinks balanced carefully in my hands. I turn around to go back to my friends when suddenly this guy is standing in front of me. I was unprepared for what would happen next. I have to preface this with saying that I had a lot of people come up to me in the Czech Republic asking to touch my hair. I have very tight curls. Not a lot of people in Prague look like me. I've had people ask to take pictures with me because of my hair. It was like my hair was some big celebrity, and every hairstylist in the city would find me and asked if I ever needed to get it cut to go to them. I even had a man follow me around a club, asking me where's my fiancé, all because of my hair. But this man did something special. This man did the unthinkable. He reaches out his pale, rough fingers and picks up a big piece of my hair. He held it up as if to examine it. Then he took his other hand that he stretched his hands out and chomped down on my hair while still attached to my head. He dropped his hands. He ground down, essentially chewing my hair for a second. I could see the hair dangling at an odd angle. His face was pretty close to mine, as I don't have particularly long hair at the time. He then lets go. I didn't have time to respond. I don't even know if he spoke English. He just fled. I wanted to wash my hair, but I was at the club. I stumbled back to my friends and told them what had happened. They were stunned. I didn't have another interaction with him that night. And to this day, it's one of the strangest things that a person has ever done to me. Years ago, my roommate and I were getting drinks at our usual place. We sat at the bar sharing a pitcher and some shots, and this creepy guy that we had never seen before kept butting into our conversation. He kept trying to buy us drinks and talk to us. He was really drunk and very pushy. We were there for a couple of hours, and it went on the whole time. We ended up leaving early because he kept saying that we should come over to his house, and when we declined, he got weird and started talking to himself. Fast forward 2 weeks later, and this guy is on the news wanted by the police. He had met a girl at the bar. She left with him, and he unalived her out in a cornfield. On April 30th, 2019, I was staying at the Crossroads Hotel in Kansas City. I was there for 2 weeks for work, but with nothing to do over the weekend and no friends in town. At around 9 p.m., I decided to have a drink at the bar by myself. I had just ordered my first beer. I emphasize ordered here. I had not even received the drink. Therefore, I was not drunk, and my mental state was still completely sober. And a girl tugged on my shirt. She was really attractive, and I was single at the time, so I turned to say hello. She whispered in my ear that the man next to her was being really creepy, and if I would help her out and pretend to be her boyfriend, she would buy me a drink. I'll be honest, I thought this was just a line, but I obliged because, frankly, she was hot. But there really was an old man, late 50s or early 60s, rocking back and forth in his chair, eyes half open, clearly 2 sheets to the wind. And he was in a tuxedo. I asked him about the tux, and he said that his daughter just got married that day. The wedding party had a room block at the hotel, and he was keeping the post-reception tab open at the bar. At this point, he started hitting on the girl, we'll call her Rachel, saying how beautiful she was and how lucky I was to have such a beautiful girlfriend, and staring at her. I really felt for her, and all women honestly in that moment. Then Rachel wrapped her arms around my waist and said, "Yep, this is my boyfriend. I love him to death. I'd kill for this guy." The guy rocked back and forth in his chair and then goes, "I get it. I've killed for love before." We looked at each other. I thought I misheard him. I'm sorry, what did you say?" I said, "I have killed for love before." For the next 10 minutes, he proceeds to tell us about this supposed murder that he committed. It was his ex-wife's boyfriend. From what I could tell, he was divorced, probably reluctantly. His wife remarried and he got jealous of the guy. And he killed him with a Glock 37, shot 3 times, twice in the chest and once in the head. And what he did with the body, he wrapped the body in black plastic bags, went fishing in the lake behind his house one morning, and threw it overboard with weights tied to the legs. I could tell he was suspicious of us asking so many questions, so I figured that it was time to leave. Then, I was proud of this. I actually got his name. I said, "It was nice to meet you, mister," and he filled in the blank. The next morning, I asked the front desk manager, who I've become friends with over the years of traveling there, if there was someone staying there with that name. She said she couldn't give me a room number for security reasons, but confirmed that someone was staying there with that name. I called the Kansas City Police Department tip hotline and told them everything I knew. I have a tipster ID number and everything. I check maybe once a month or so to see if there's been any arrests, but no dice so far. I really thought this guy was messing with me, but the more I thought about it, the more I thought maybe not. I could totally see someone having this weigh on their hearts, feeling vulnerable at their daughter's wedding, being drunk enough to feel untouchable, and trying to get it off their chest. His one mistake was that I was sober at the time and remembered everything. Please message me and let me know if you know of any unsolved murders that match this description. Back when I was 18, my best friend Ann and I used to go to this club quite frequently. The legal age to drink in my country is 18. It was a trendy place with cheapish drinks and really good music. My dad never stopped me from going clubbing, but he always told me to not get drunk and to be aware of my surroundings. Always. My mom always told me to look out for Ann, and for Ann to look out for me. Girls need to stick together. So it was an average ladies' night on Wednesday, where girls enter for free and drinks are cheaper. Ann and I start drinking and get pretty buzzed but not drunk. Ann needed to go to the bathroom, so I followed her and waited outside. So the male and female bathrooms are right next to each other, and there's a sofa area in front so people can sit and wait. On the sofa, there was a girl who was obviously very, very drunk, and she was in between 2 guys who were laughing, but it looked off. They were harassing her, which could have been mistaken as just 2 friends having a laugh at their female friend being drunk. They proceed to literally carry her out of the club. At this point, Ann comes out, and I motion to her that this girl looks like she's in danger. We both tail them, and the more I see them interact with her, the more I feel like they're about to assault her. My friend and I go up to her and start saying, "Oh my God, Angela, there you are." We didn't know her actual name. We just wanted to get her out of that situation. The 2 guys were shocked and put her down. Ann asks them who they are, and they claim that they were just trying to help her and bring her out of the club for some fresh air. I wanted to give them a piece of my mind, but I somehow read Ann's mind and decided against it. We were just 2 18-year-old girls, and they were 2 large 25-plus-year-old guys. We wanted to save the girl, but we didn't want to jeopardize our own safety either. So we pull her away and put her arms around our shoulders and carry her out of the club ourselves. We're trying to ask her if she has an ID on her, or if she has friends at the club also. She was too drunk to answer. We finally got outside and saw a small group of guys and girls around that girl's age. They see us and run towards us and her. They were her friends. The girls in the group take her from me and Ann and start talking to her in their own language. The guys thank us profusely and we explained that we found her inside. We later learned that they were German tourists, and this was their first time in our country. It still haunts me to this day about what would have happened if we didn't intervene and save Angela. So remember, please be safe, drink responsibly, and always have a friend with you when you're out. Look out for other girls. We need each other. I thought I was going to die in a strip club. So a little backstory. I was a dancer for 6 years. I've worked in many cities and clubs. At the time of this story, I wasn't a rookie. I was well versed in the industry. At the time this took place, I was like 20 or 21. It was also in Texas at one of the upscale clubs. I never imagined something like this would happen in this place, but apparently I was wrong. I started my shift at about 6 p.m. I liked to get there early to meet with some of my regulars before the crowds came in. It was like 8:30 or 9 o'clock, and this really good-looking guy came in with some friends. They were all older, like 40 to 45. I grabbed some of my hustle friends and we went and sat with them. It wasn't hard to convince these guys into a VIP room with bottle service. But this is where it gets kind of weird. The guy that I was talking to wanted a separate room for just us. I thought maybe because his friends seemed rowdy and wanting to party hard, he wanted to have a more relaxed area. I wasn't complaining because that meant that I wouldn't have to share my cut of the room, so stupid me saw dollar signs and went with it. We get 2 bottles of Dom Perignon, mixed drinks, and some shots. Now, a lot of guys that come into strip clubs really want to let loose, and they brought drugs as well. These guys had just about everything besides crack, meth, and heroin. I was definitely a party girl at the time too, so yes, I partook in some of these, but I also wasn't stupid. So at this time, we were all hanging out in one room together. I took a little hit of coke and off the back of my hand and continued drinking. After we were all hyped up and ready to party, my guy pulled me into the other room. This guy was like 6'4", obviously worked out a lot and was attractive. I, on the other hand, without my heels, was 5'6" and like 120 pounds. I sat down on his lap. I started talking to him and laying down my moves to get him to empty his wallet. We were having a really good conversation, and my bouncers were really good about checking up on the girls in the rooms, because they're pretty secluded on the second floor. After about 20 minutes of talking, something snapped, and all of a sudden he literally puts his hand around my neck, lifted me up, and slammed me against the back of the couch. The couch backs were tall and padded, so it wouldn't have been hurt on the other side, plus with all the music. I was literally frozen in fear. After almost 3 years of dancing, I had never been in this situation. He started calling me names, spat in my face, and his grip on my neck would get tighter and tighter when he would make me feel like I needed to take a deep breath, like I was going to scream. Luckily, there were also VIP rooms across the large overlook, and a bouncer noticed me kicking and flailing. I faintly remember, like all of the bouncers running into the room, they had to pry me out of his hands. When I was finally back to sitting on the couch, they had him on the floor outside the room, and his buddies acted like they didn't even know him. My manager grabbed me and carried me like a baby to the dressing room, asked if I needed any medical attention. I said no, I was just really shaken up. His buddies talked to my manager and basically gave me guilt money for the happening. Apparently, he was going through a crappy divorce and just snapped on me instead of his ex. To the guy at the club, strippers are people too, and let's not meet. This happened last night at 2 a.m., We woke up to screaming and crying in the hall. My neighbor had just come back from the club apparently, and her gentleman company had insisted on walking her to our doorstep. She lived down the hall 2 doors from us, but she refused to let him in for anything more and told him that she has an early morning and so on. He then got aggressive and insulting to her and ended up slapping her twice and punched her on the nose once. She talked to me while they were waiting for the police and then tried to steal her phone to get his money's worth of that night. That's when my boyfriend yanked our door open and ran out while I ran towards her and pulled her into our flat. The guy dropped her phone and ran away. This guy. I don't have any words. The police came and took her in to get her to the hospital and everything recorded. I'm buying a baseball bat or something similar. So, as my username suggests, I'm a Fiji Indian. Well, at least my parents are. I, on the other hand, was born and raised in Australia and grew up with the Western way of life. One of my close friends has just gotten engaged, and all of us girls wanted to go out to celebrate. We ended up going to this club that was holding somewhat Indians' night out event. Around 2 a.m., I leave to go back home, as usual. I visit my parents on the weekends, and I wanted some sleep before then. I usually drive everywhere, but due to restrictions on my license, I'm unable to drink. I'm on my green peas for those who are familiar with Australian road rules. I left my friends and walked towards the building where my car was parked. It was parked near the train station, and the walk was roughly 500 meters to a kilometer away from the club that I was at. So I felt kind of safe walking it. As I was walking out, a pair of Indian guys walked out behind me as I was walking towards the train station. I heard the men started to say things in Hindi, like, "That girl is good," and "Look at her legs," and super shady stuff like that. I then started walking faster and they kept on following me. At this point, I was running to my car and fearing for my life as I entered the building of the car park where the 2 security guards were. And I ran up to them and told them what was happening. And one of the security guards stayed with me, and the other walked up to the 2 men and moved them along. The men were saying things like if she was a decent girl, then she wouldn't be out at night and wearing short clothes. After the men had left, the security guards asked if I wanted to report it to the police. And I began getting scared, and I said no. I got into my car to get the F out of there. So, the creepy Indian dudes at the club, let's not meet again. In the summer of 2016, my boyfriend was away for 2 months in the Middle East on a trip, and I was missing him a lot. So my friend Nadine invited me out dancing. I'm not a big club person, but I agreed and was looking forward to spending some time with her. The clubbing itself was fun. We stayed right until closing, and nothing out of the ordinary happened. After the club closed, the common thing is to stand outside and hang out for a bit. Nadine and I were chatting when a young man approached us. He started talking to us and invited us to go get some food down the street. His name was John. We agree, as the area is packed with people and police officers, so it's not just us alone with him. We order our food and he prays, for both of us. I had never had this happen before, and I had no idea how to respond. So I thanked him and downgraded my fries to small. We were all sitting on the sidewalk eating, when John pointed to a figure across the street. A man was just standing there, staring in our direction. He was there for some time, but we weren't too concerned until he started walking towards us. He was tall, thin, and pale. He turned to me and takes a deep breath and said, "I've been following you for a while now, and I think you're gorgeous, and yeah." I had very limited experience with boys, aside from my boyfriend, so I had no idea how to respond or how to turn him down. I started out a thank you or a gee whiz or something. The man sat down uninvited. He introduced himself as Caden, and he invites us back to his workplace, a weed dispensary that he's the manager of. Right away, alarm bells went off. I had no interest in weed or him, but Nadine was adamant about going, and I will never leave my friend alone with two strange men, so I went with her. It was right around the corner. We entered and he locked us in. We sat in the back room with Caden, and he turned on some music, and the others all smoked, but I declined. Caden started eating some smoked salmon strips from a sandwich bag and talked about how weed is the only way the government can't read your mind and other stuff like that. He started getting really angry and worked up. He kept mentioning my hair. He got mad at me for not liking the music that he put on, despite my never having said anything about it. A huge red siren was going off in my head. John finally had enough. Him and I had an entire conversation without saying a word, I swear. We knew we had to get out of there. John and I convinced Nadine to leave, but we had to get Caden to unlock the door first. John got loud and big, demanding Caden to let us leave. We practically sprinted out. John paid for my taxi home, made sure that I got home safely, and I thought that was the end. A few months later, a series of SAs occurred in the train tracks by my house. I was scared. Teen girls had been attacked randomly, and it was on the local news. He had been especially transfixed on their underwear during the attacks. Eventually, the police had a suspect and released his photo, which my dad asked me to look at, in case I saw him around town. My blood went cold. It was Caden. He was known to the police, and they advised the public not to approach him, as he had a history of violence. He ran. They had wanted person alerts on the news and played videos from his YouTube channel of him shirtless smoking weed. It was all kind of absurd. They eventually found him a week later, trying to cross the border to another state. He got convicted of SA against a minor and went to prison, but only for a year. He's out now, and I have no idea where he is. If you've read previous stories that I've posted on this channel, you'd think that New Orleans is a pretty bad place to visit. It's really not. You can be safe as long as you listen to your instincts. If something seems off, get out of the situation as best as you can. Because of Hurricane Katrina, I no longer live in New Orleans, but I visit periodically because my boyfriend is from there and has family there still. One night, we decided to go to the French Quarter and hit up Bourbon Street. It's probably the only street that most people know, and it's pretty much the end of the part most people visit. From Bourbon to the river, it's crowded. North of Bourbon, it's empty. When we got to Bourbon, we split up. We wanted to go to a strip club, and I wanted to walk around a bit, pop into some shops, and maybe find a beer that wasn't $9. I wandered around Bourbon, looked at the antique shops on Royal, went down to Decatur and checked out Jackson Square, then looped back up to Bourbon. It took me about a half hour or so. As I was walking down Bourbon to the strip club, I saw my boyfriend standing out front waving at me. I walked over to him and he said that he was ready to leave, so we started heading back to the car. On the way, he had told me about a strange encounter that he had with some random guy on the street. My boyfriend had gone outside for a smoke a little while earlier. He rolls his cigarettes by hand. He buys a pouch of tobacco and uses rolling papers to make a cigarette. Because of this, a lot of people think it's pot. You don't know how many times we've been asked about it. Evidently, some guy saw him doing this and thought that he would be interested in buying some pot. Neither one of us smokes pot, so my boyfriend was not interested. The guy, however, was insistent. "I've got some good stuff, man. Just come around the corner and we'll make a deal." Alarm bells are starting to ring in my boyfriend's head. Generally, drug dealers don't approach you, despite what 80s PSAs would have you believe. You're generally introduced to them by people that you know who can vouch for you. You gotta avoid the narcs. My boyfriend refused again, and the guy pushed some more. "It's real good stuff. I'll give you a great deal. Let's just walk around the corner." My boyfriend did not want to get off of Bourbon and go down to the deserted side of the street that this guy had suggested. Eventually, the guy left him alone, but the experience made him feel uneasy, so he was relieved when I showed up a few minutes later. After he told me about that, he explained his theories on what the deal was with his unprofessional drug dealer. Theory 1 is that there was no pot, and this guy was just trying to get him to go to a deserted street so that he could mug my boyfriend. Possible. Theory 2 is that there was no drugs and the guy was a cop who wanted to lure my boyfriend off of a crowded street so that they could make an arrest without drawing too much attention. Also possible. Theory 3 is that the guy was going to try to rip him off and sell him some oregano or catnip or some other type of fake weed. I don't think either one of us thought the deal was legit in any way. He was trying way too hard, according to my boyfriend. I was 18 when this happened. It was my friend's birthday, and to celebrate 5 or 6 friends, and I decided to hit a club. As we were queuing up to get into the club, I had noticed an older man who must have been in his 40s kept staring at my friends and I, and feeling a little creeped out by this, I told my friends, but we just shrugged it off at the time. Once we finally got inside the club, it was still getting busy, so my friends and I bought our drinks and sat down. While I was talking to my friend about whatever, I noticed the older man from before. Now this dude looked crazy. He had crazy black hair, wild eyes that gave me chills, and looked like it hadn't been washed in a while. Basically, he looked like a real sleazebag. I quietly pointed this out to my friends, and since he had made us uncomfortable, we decided to hit the dance floor. This is where it got messed up. Creeper had decided to join us, so we moved to another part of the club to get away from him. Nope, he found us, and I clearly remember him creepily watching us as we danced. By now, we're all like, oh heck no. So we move away again, but he was walking right through the crowd and was right on our tail. Now we're beginning to freak out. The dude had such a strange smile and looked like he was enjoying the fact that he was scaring us. By now we're freaking out, and one of my friends is in tears because of this butthole. We decide to hide in the bathroom and figure out how we're going to handle this whole situation. My friends decide to tell one of the security guys and decide to ring my friend's dad, as by now she's beyond freaked out. We tell the security guys what was happening, and they went to look for Mr. Creepy Guy, and we head out of the club, making sure that he wasn't behind us. And we finally got a taxi home. Thank you so much for listening to all of the stories in this video. I hope you enjoyed them. I also hope that you enjoy the extra rain at the end. Get a good night's sleep, everyone, and I'll read to you in the next video. Bye-bye now.